What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, I have Russ Rankin from Good Riddance, so stay tuned for that. Please support the pod by subscribing to it wherever you listen to it. Also, please like it, rate it, review it wherever you listen to it. If you want to go the extra mile, you can go to patreon.com/185 miles south. Become a monthly Patreon. There is bonus episodes for pretty much every interview podcast. I have some buddies on. We talk about the episode as well as go through that person's discography. So that is cool. They are some of my favorite podcasts, and the Patreons are the people that keep the pod alive. So check it out, and let's get on with the pod.
"185 Miles South", a hardcore punk rock podcast.
What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, we have Russ Rankin from Good Riddance. How you doing, Russ?
Doing all right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Sure, thanks for asking me.
Yeah, man. Do you remember when you first got into punk and hardcore, and what year and what age you would have been?
I don't remember the age. I was 1983, and it was I played snare drum in my high school marching band, and at that time I was mostly just kind of a surfer guy, and I would listen to a lot of reggae, and then just whatever was on the radio. And another guy that played snare drum with me in the band, named Jay, was a punk rocker. And at our high school, we had maybe 2 or 3 punk rockers, and he was one of them. And he had like a mohawk and a trench coat and docks. He was a cool dude, a great drummer. And we were on a band trip. I'm sorry, do you want the story?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So we're on a trip to go march in some stupid band review somewhere, and we're in the back of the bus, and he's got a boombox, and he had playing a tape, and he played me "Chemical Warfare" by the Dead Kennedys. It's the first like punk song I actually heard, and I was just like, "Holy fuck, what is this? This is amazing!" And he told me a little bit about it, and I've listened to that tape like a couple times on that trip. And as soon as we got home, I went down to the record store and I bought "Plastic Surgery Disasters" by Dead Kennedy, which that song is not on, but that was my first punk record, and that was it's all downhill after that.
Where do you go after that? Do you remember like the next couple bands you got into after Dead Kennedys? Because they're such a unique sounding band. I'm curious of if that's the one that hooked you. What were the next ones, and did they like measure up to that?
Back then, like I didn't have like a lot of friends yet that were punkers, and there was not obviously the smorgasbord of music at our fingertips like there is today. I know I had a couple different plans. Like I read Thrasher magazine because I was starting to skate a lot too, and Thrasher magazine back then would have section, I think it was called Notes from the Underground or something like that. They had a section in the back always about music, where they would review records or talk about bands. And so I would like look in there to see who they were talking about, and then maybe go buy, if I could make that connection between skateboarding and music, like whatever band was cool with Thrasher, I wanted to check out, and so that was kind of a gateway. I got some compilations that way, which were great because you could hear a bunch of different bands with that one price. And I think I bought a JFA album soon after that because they were skateboarding on it. Like there's a picture of them skateboarding. And I would also just go to the record store and go through the punk stuff. And I would basically see which album covers looked cool and which album covers had live pictures on them or on the back. Because if it looked like a wild scene, like people stage diving, and if the band looked all fucking crazy, I would be more apt to buy that album than if there was no photos. And then, soon after that, I got turned on to Maximum Rock and Roll. So I would buy Maximum Rock and Roll every month. And the columnists and people that worked there would have their top records. It was like it was in the front of the magazine. So they would have like the top things they were listening to. And I went largely off of that for a long time. Because I thought Maximum Rock and Roll was amazing, and it opened my eyes to a wider scene. Like there was all these cool scene reports about what was going on in the punk scene and in other places. And so I would just go off that and try to buy buy the bands and the albums that people were talking about. Like there was like 3 or 4 different Maximum Rock and Roll people that all like the same thing. I would probably go buy it. And that's kind of how that went down.
How much later was it that you discovered that like there were punk shows in your hometown?
Probably a couple years. There was a club in Santa Cruz right downtown by our bus station, and it was called Club Culture at the time. And I would see flyers all over town, and people would, punkers would hang out there and line up there. And that was a pretty good spot there. Bands came through like Black Flag, bands from overseas would come through. Like, it was a happening spot. That was where the shows were at that time, the mid 80s in Santa Cruz, and then later on, that was a lot of, just like VFW halls and stuff. There wasn't really ever a proper punk club after Club Culture. There was there was a place called Palookaville that was open for a while in the 90s that had shows, but it wasn't specifically punk. But like my band played there. A bunch of touring bands played there. But it's most of the time sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's kind of it. Like it was after Club Culture, there was Palookaville. There's a club called the Catalyst in downtown Santa Cruz that's been there since the 70s. Tons of rock bands have played there. And, for a long time they wouldn't book punk shows there. And so we would have to have our shows at halls and stuff. And then they eventually started doing punk shows, and they would do, that's a bigger room. So they would do a lot of, the bigger national acts, like a Bad Religion or somebody like that would play the Catalyst, because they had the capacity. And then, later on when they started booking more punk shows, like my bands have played there. And there's also a smaller room, like it's called the Atrium, which used to be like a front restaurant to this place, the Catalyst. And so that'll hold like maybe 400 or so. So that's a great place for like a smaller local show, or maybe a medium-sized national band.
Yeah, well, around the year 2000, you had it was like a big hall that like upstairs there was a giant room, and then if it was a smaller show, they'd do it in the basement. I think that was just a VFW, right? Yeah,
that's the Vets Hall downtown.
Okay.
Yeah, we played there tons of times, both upstairs, downstairs. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. So I haven't done anything on Santa Cruz yet, and so since you were around, I'd like to try to brush on like the 80s scene a bit. Because Power of Expression comes out in 86. You're already going to shows by then. What are Santa Cruz shows like in that era? Like, does that spark anything? Like a big album coming out from the area?
Well, growing up in the 80s and being into the skateboarding and surfing and punk scene, because I think up and down the coast, it's the same. Like if you grew up in a beach town, like a surf town, a lot of times the punk scene and the skating and surf scenes all sort of intersected in places, obviously, where it wouldn't in other parts of the country. And so the biggest thing to ever come out of my hometown was a band called Bl'ast. And they were incredibly heavy, so intense live. And they put out 3 albums. They had most of their albums were on SST, and they toured. Like they actually went out and toured and played all over the place. And so they were sort of like the conquering heroes for us, like for me growing up, was so cool to be able to be from the town that Bl'ast was from. And that was probably the biggest thing to come out of our town at that time or since.
What were those shows like, though, in like the 86, 87 era when you saw Bl'ast in Santa Cruz?
Pretty intense. Like, I'd like to say they were like, I mean, they were fun. They were packed. There was a lot of fights. There was a lot of, a few different like groups of people in town that loved punk music that didn't really hang out with each other or ever see each other. And then once there was a show, suddenly all these people are in the same room together. Maybe there's alcohol or stuff involved. And so everybody's sort of like looking at each other like, who are these people? And so it could get violent, not always. I can vividly remember one show in particular that was, one of the worst I've ever been or seen since. But a lot of times it was fine. But the punk was there was violence at a lot of shows, and it was a fine line between like, is this just like, there's a lot of people slamming and stage diving, or are there people like with ill will toward each other? Bl'ast had inherent in their music, I think, was just a lot of menace and a lot of tension, and I think that their music was amazing for those reasons. That being said, it was like a different vibe than going to see like a pop punk band or something.
Sure. I mean, the Oxnard area where I grew up is kind of similar to Santa Cruz in that way, of like big shows. You just have dudes coming out. Not everyone's super into the music. Some people just want to slam. And it creates like an interesting atmosphere where it can get chaotic.
And I think from what I know about that area too, it's a lot of the same things. It's like the surf element, the localism, like throw in some mild like gang affiliation. There's just it's a mixed bag, and so you get a show and you throw all these elements together. These people that don't always see each other, and sometimes it can get off the rails.
Yeah. So 1990 is when you jump in, or does it predate that? When do you decide to start like participating in music yourself and doing a band?
Probably late 80s. I had some friends of mine that were jamming. My childhood friend was a drummer, a guy I grew up with, and there was a couple of people that he knew from school. I was a year older than all of them, and I'd already dropped out of school, and he had some friends he was jamming with, and he wasn't really, he surfed and he skateboarded, but he wasn't like a super into punk. And I went and hung out with him to drinking one night. This was before I sobered up, and I was like, man, you guys need a singer. Like, I'll sing for you guys, because I'd heard Bad Religion, a Bad Religion EP, and I thought that the singing was great, and I thought, man, I want to do that. And then I told them that I would sing in their band if they played all these Sex Pistols covers. Like, basically, if they changed what they were playing, I would sing for them. And they did, and so we played some parties and stuff like that, and we played almost exclusively Sex Pistols covers. And then so that was probably like later 80s, 85, 86, maybe, like that.
The first time you put out a piece of music, though, is that the first Good Riddance demo in 1990?
We'd released a couple demos before that, just like to sell around at the record store downtown. But there was a demo called Loaded for Bear that we recorded, which we actually advertised in Maximum Rock and Roll and was reviewed in Maximum Rock and Roll. And then that eventually got us our first 7-inch deal. And that was 1990.
Okay. All right. So Discogs is off. So I apologize for that. Does State of Grace happen in between like Good Riddance demos? Is that a separate project?
Wow, how did you find out about State of Grace?
I got to do my homework, dude. This is a serious
State of
podcast.
Grace. So basically, what happened was it's a little bit of a longer story, and I'll try to like economize it. So in the late '80s, I'm playing in this band. It's called Good Riddance, and there's thrash metal is just starting to take off, like crossover thrash metal stuff. And this band, who our drummer is friends with this guy that he knew from grade school, who's a bass player in this thrash band, and they're called Rude Awakening. And they're from the Santa Cruz Mountains. And so our bands decided to play together. We do a couple things where we get a generator and we played on a beach together. We played at a park together with a generator, and we played a couple hall shows together. And we just became good friends with them. And one of their guitar players was, he had long hair and all that stuff. And back then they had the pegged jeans and the big puffy white sneakers, like the thrash look. But that guy was starting to get into punk because of RKL. So like he was starting to, like, because of RKL, he started listening to some punk too. So he was a thrash metal guy, but he was also turning into like an RKL Bad Religion guy. And he and I became really good friends, and we would flyer together for our shows that our bands were playing, and we would hang out all the time. And then one time, Good Riddance had a party booked, and then the week later we had an actual show in San Jose, like actually out of town booked. And the show in San Jose was with this band called Sticky, who was a pretty big band from the East Bay. And our guitar player was skateboarding and broke his wrist. And I was like, oh, fuck. So I asked this guitar player that I had been hanging out with from Rude Awakening if he'd fill in. And that's Luke, who's, still in Good Riddance today. And so Luke was like, yeah, totally. I like your guys' music. And so Luke filled in. And then pretty soon, in 1990, like New Year's Eve from 89 to 90, that night, I was at a party. This local band, the Vicious Midgets, were playing at a house party, and I was there. Luke was there, and he's like, "Hey, Rude Awakening's probably breaking up. Would you guys be cool if I played second guitar in your band?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah, totally." And so we started doing that, and then we decided that. So our bass player and drummer both quit to move to Tahoe to work at a snowboarding place, and totally left us hanging. Like, we had a couple parties booked, and they were just like, yeah, we want to go snowboard and all that. So we recruited a drummer and bass player from the Vicious Midgets, this other local band, who I think were supposedly winding down and not going to play anymore. And then those guys quit. And so it left me and Luke just like we were hanging, like we had nothing. So we wanted to play music really, really bad. We both found out that we were equally motivated to make a go of being in a band. Like, we both wanted to write original music really bad. We both wanted to try to play shows out of Santa Cruz really bad. And not everybody did. A lot of people want to be in a band, but not everybody wants to like drop everything and put in the work. And that's fine. It's not easy. It's not for everybody. But Luke and I were kind of like kindred spirits in that. So here we are. We're like super gung-ho, and we got no band. It's just me and him. And so we were like, fuck, what do we do? And so two of the guys, his old singer and his old second guitar player from his thrash band, Rude Awakening, were still wanting to play. I said I'd play bass. And then we found this random dude to play drums, who was not a punk at all. Like, his favorite drummer was Mitch Mitchell from Jimi Hendrix band. Like, he was like a jazz drummer. But he was really good. Like really good. And so we just started playing together. And that's how State of Grace started. And our influence, we wanted to sound like, I think we were talking about, we wanted to sound like if Poison Idea and Fugazi had a baby. That's what we wanted to sound like. So we started writing stuff like that, and it was actually really fun. And I think the music, like we put out one demo tape, and I still think the music is pretty good for where we were at musically. And we did a couple tours. We went out to Texas and back. We went up to Washington State and back down, just through like word of mouth. I used Book Your Own Fucking Life to call people and book shows, and that was the first time that Luke and I got a chance to tour, and we got a taste of it. Was with State of Grace, and then the guitar player left. The second guitar player left. We got another guy to play. We did another tour out to Texas and back. We were writing a whole bunch of new stuff that I thought was even better, but we never recorded it. We played a house party one day, and then we never played again after that. So that's State of Grace. So that would have been probably 91 maybe to 93, something like that.
Yeah, and then you dive back into Good Riddance, and that's when you do the Loaded for Bear. How does that transition work?
So by that time, our original drummer had moved back and was itching to play, and the bass player who had been in that band Vicious Midgets, we got that guy to play bass. His name is Devin. So we were a 4-piece again, and we did Loaded for Bear. Because once Luke was playing in our band, like he just had all these riffs. Like he had riffs pouring out of him, like so much stuff that was cool. I thought was cool, and it was nice to like have original songs. So we started writing stuff, and it was going really good, and we were playing a lot locally, and started to have a little bit of a following, and the Loaded for Bear demo sold really good at the record store, and then it got a really good review, like I said, in Action Rock and Roll, which made us really happy. And we started sending it out to labels. This label out of Texas had already contacted us and wanted to use 4 of the songs that were recordings from that demo to make a 7-inch. So we did that, and that was cool to actually have a vinyl, like something to sell at shows that wasn't a demo tape. And that was cool. And then right around that time, I also started playing guitar in another band here locally. So I was doing 2 bands.
What was that band, and what was it like?
That band was called Fury 66.
Okay. Yeah, very familiar with them.
It was a drummer, guitar player, and bass player from a band called Backwash, and the singer of a band called Schlep, and me. And so I played second guitar.
Yeah, very cool.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm done.
Okay. Jumping into Gidget. So, I mean, I guess, and this ties into Loaded for Bear. The Gidget 7-inch really does sound like a demo, which is funny because it is just some of the demo songs. It really looks like you have a lot of like well thought out ideas already, but it does seem like you're kind of searching for a sound. Because all the songs are good, Gidget? But it's not, Gidget, but it's not super cohesive. I think that Patriarch song is great. And I was kind of curious why it didn't, like, because you redid Last Believer, and I thought Patriarch is a song that if you would have redone it and worked it in, like, that song's really good for being so early. Do you not feel that way about that song?
Which song?
Patriarch.
I just listened to that not that long ago for the first time in a long time, and yeah, I do like it. That bass line that our bass player Devin had come up with, that bass line that sort of drives the song. And I was, because of my, I was radicalized pretty early on by most of the punk that I bought. Like I wasn't a fun and games punker. I was like a political punker. Like I gravitated towards the bands that were more political with like a potent message, and so a lot of the stuff I was trying to write at that point was more in the vein of radicalism and protest music, as I saw it. And so I thought the lyrics were okay, and I liked the melody, and I thought it was real. When we played it, the recording doesn't do it justice, but the choruses are heavy. So yeah, I mean, for like where we were at, given the time and stuff, I thought it was a pretty grown up song to write, I guess.
Yeah, it's really good. And I think that what you talk about with the lyrics is kind of why Good Riddance stands out as a special band once like the fat stuff really starts rolling, because you are a serious band writing about serious topics in a good way. The same way that like a Propaganda stands out, right? Because they're a serious band in their lyrics. I mean, I enjoy all those bands. But I've talked about Lagwagon on the podcast a fair amount of times as like the band that had to drive me to hardcore, because I can't listen to like someone sing about their cat, even though I love my cat. It's just like I need a little bit more meat there in the lyrics. And
yeah, I mean, it's some people are like, I love the Vandals, and but that wasn't my brand of punk rock. Like, I think if every band was just like fist in the air, like overthrow the government kind of stuff, maybe it would be boring. Like, it's cool that there's different flavors in there. But yeah, it's strange. It's the things that we gravitate towards are the things that click with us when we first get exposed to this music.
Yeah. So the Decoy 7-inch, you hook up a Fat. The sound is like fully formed at this point. I mean, United Cigar, 12-Year Circus, these are classic Good Riddance songs. How do you feel when you're like writing this stuff? Do you know that like you've made it to like that next level of songwriting where you're writing stuff that you absolutely love?
I think at that point, so right before that, we had Furious 66 bass player, like Devin had quit our band, had quit Good Riddance, and so Furious 66's bass player was in the band. Like there was a little bit of time where the bands shared 3 members, me, Rich on drums, and Tom Kennedy on bass. Like Furious 86 would practice at the practice spot, and then Rye and Joe would leave, and Luke would show up, and we'd have Good Riddance practice right after. Like, it was very strange. Not uncommon, I guess, for like a lot of smaller towns or cities, but so Tom was a pretty good songwriter, their bass player, and Luke was just, he was still just really prolific with the riffs, and I was just beginning to get a handle on picking up a guitar and trying to write songs. A lot of the stuff that Luke wrote, when I'd hear him play it, right away I could think of a melody or a way to sing. But a lot of the stuff I couldn't as easily. And so I thought it would be good for me to learn how to play guitar to try to like write stuff that I could sing over. So that's kind of where we were at. And then Tom quit our band to do Furious 66 full time. And we needed a bass player. This is a funny story. And so Luke's down at Kinko's making a flyer for a bass player, getting it copied off. And the guy that's helping him at Kinko's goes, "I play bass." And it's Chuck. And so that's how we got Chuck in the band.
That's great.
Yeah. So he had just moved to Santa Cruz because he grew up in Long Beach. And he had moved to Santa Cruz because his girlfriend was going to school at the university here. So he hadn't been in town that long. And he had played bass before. And he was working at Kinko's. Like, that was just super random. And so he got in the band, and we already had all this material. And so we went to demo. We went to record the songs for the Decoy 7-inch because we've been talking to Fat, and Mike was like, "Yeah, I kind of like, the way he is. He's like, I kind of like you guys. It's okay. We'll do a 7-inch, and then I'll let you guys stew for a while and write some better songs." Jesus. And so we went into. I mean, I think it was more like he was sort of shepherding us.
Okay.
Like, here's a little taste. Like, these songs are okay, and like we'll release this, and then we'll see what you guys come up with after that. And then we went to the studio to record those songs for the Decoy 7-inch. And while we were there, because while we'd been talking to him, we had been writing furiously a whole bunch of stuff that he hadn't heard. And we went in and recorded the songs for the Decoy 7-inch and all these other new songs that we had. And then he says, these new songs are a lot better than I was expecting, and I'm ready to go ahead and do a full length. So we were like happy about that.
Yeah, and you must have jumped right in because the first LP is the same year as Decoy.
I think Decoy is 94, and I think that Forgotten Country came out in 95.
Okay. Yeah, so how was it approaching writing an LP? Because, you've done short Bl'ast before, but Forgotten Country comes out to be like a classic modern punk rock record. Do you go in with like a full perspective of like what you want to do, or are you just writing song by song, like the best songs you can?
It was our first full length, so it was basically a hodgepodge of songs that were new within the last 9 months and ones that have been hanging around for years. And I didn't have any idea what we're getting into. Like, I had no clue. It was a super massive learning curve, and it was very humbling, recording that album for me.
Can you elaborate on why it was humbling?
Well, I'd never had anybody rate my singing before. I'd never had anybody tell me I was flat or sharp, nor did I even know what those meant. Because we'd always done like what every band does, like, hey, let's pool our money together. Let's go to the studio for 8 hours and bang it out as fast as we can. And so, but now there's a budget and there's time and there's a really good engineer, and there's Mike. There's Mike there too, making sure that everything, quality control. And so it was a lot of pressure, and none of us really knew. None of us had been through that before. So it was all new. Like the level of scrutiny and the attention to detail. And for me, as a quote unquote singer, not having any idea how to control what I was doing with my voice. Like, as soon as the first time that they stopped the tape and said, yeah, you're flat, like, and I had no idea what that meant. And I was just like, fuck. And I just wanted to go home. Like, I was like, I'm done.
Right.
I felt like I was letting the band down. I felt like I was an imposter. I felt like I was, it wasn't really, like, still listening to that album brings all that back. And like, of course, now today, I wish we could re-record that album, knowing what we know now, but you don't get to do that. And it's kind of a testament to the structure of the songs, I guess, and some of the message that there's a lot of people who still tell me that they love that album. I definitely don't, but you have to start somewhere.
Did any of the other guys struggle like with that level of scrutiny before you got to the vocals?
I'm sure we all did. I can't speak to them, but like Luke is the kind of guy that like is super like plan ahead. Like, I remember Luke would look for the few weeks before we went in to record that, he had this notebook and he was writing down all his guitar parts and like his plan for like, I'm going to do this on this channel, like all this stuff. And like in the studio, things get thrown at you. Like, hey, why don't we try this? Or how about if we take that part out? Or why don't, whether you're whatever you're doing, like singing, same thing. And like Luke would get the deer in the headlights look when they would try to like change up his like well-planned deal. And so, he had to, learn how to be a little bit less rigid and to be able to try something different, because he not only did he have it all planned, but he practiced everything a specific way 1 billion times. And drum parts, same thing. So I actually think that Rich's drumming is my favorite part of Forgotten Country. Like, to me, that's the best part of it.
It is really, really good. Does the popularity of the band go up exponentially after this record comes out? Because now you have a full length on a established label.
100%. It was night and day. And
How did that
especially
feel?
we were just happy to get on a label. And like Luke and I had gone to see NoFX a couple times and we were fans. And then I listened to a couple of early releases. Like I thought Propaganda was great. And I thought the Lagwagon record was great. And so we were like, wow, this is like, there's some cool music coming out on this label. And we like the guy who owns it. We like his band a lot. But none of us could have foreseen like the next, the following couple years of how that sound and that label would become so big. So we were like, right place, right time kind of thing. I mean, granted, we had sent demo tapes to probably 150 labels and follow-up calls and mail. And we were playing everywhere we could, anywhere we could. Like we were working as hard as we could. So it wasn't like a record deal just got slipped under the door while we were sitting watching TV. Like I think luck is the residue of hard work sometimes. But that being said, like, yeah, we were definitely fortunate to go along for the ride with the fat explosion that happened the next few years. So now we were known, and then like that year after Forgotten Country came out, like right as it came out or right before it came out, there was was called the Fat Records Tour, and it was us opening, and then I think it was Strung Out, Tilt, No Use for a Name, and Lagwagon. And we played, California, Arizona, Nevada. And those shows were so fun, like hanging out with all those other bands. And we were all sort of like experiencing this big flux of energy and buzz at the same time. And we were just happy to be there. Like we were the new band on the label. We were opening the shows, but we're still having great crowds and people are reacting really well to our music. And the other bands were appreciative of our music as well. And then we went, we did our first time to Europe. No Use for a Name took us to Europe that spring. And we'd never been. And that was insane. And then we did 2 different North American tours that summer.
How did you feel about like spending so much time on the road? Because some people adapt to it and some people don't. But it seems like obviously you guys got used to it if you didn't love it out the bat. But what was that like having your life change like that and now becoming kind of a nomad after growing up in like kind of a small hive?
It was really hard at first. Like I can vividly remember when we were it was before Europe. We were doing a little like weekend thing with No Use for a Name. We think we were playing in Corona, California. And like the person who was booking our shows at the time kept contacting us like, you guys got this and this. Can we do this? Can we do this? And like, it just kept stacking up further and further out. And even though like, that's what Luke and I, that's what we wanted. That's what we wanted the whole time. And Chuck was into it. But then we realized, we kind of all looked at each other and we're like, we're going to have to quit our jobs. Cause we've been working almost like working 2 jobs, but only getting paid for one up till then. Because being in a band, trying to make it at that time for us anyway, it was a lot of work that we just like rolled up our sleeves and did. The mailing of demos, calling, playing anywhere we could, like just always scratching and trying to get up, to like get to the next rung on the ladder, and but very minimal returns money wise. And like we did 2 separate little tours when just with Gidget being out, and Luke and I basically bankrolled the tours, and we lost all our money. Like we didn't make any money. We stayed on people's couches or we slept in the van at rest stops, but we still lost money. And so in a lot of ways, like all this stuff happening was like what we had wanted the whole time, but it was it was the unknown, like if I'm working my day job, I know I'm going to get a paycheck every 2 weeks. If I do this, I have no idea what's going to happen. Am I going to come home from tour with enough money to pay rent? Am I going to have to move? Am I going to have to put my stuff in storage and live on someone's couch? Like, none of us knew what was going to happen. And it was super terrifying. But we also knew that we would regret it for the rest of our lives if we didn't do it. And so that's where we were at. But it was definitely intimidating because it was the unknown. And we didn't have any illusions about stardom or big paydays. Like we wanted to like just function. Like we wanted to be able to keep the lights on at home and pay the rent. And that was probably about it. But we weren't even sure if that was feasible. We didn't know.
Yeah. And it's not an overnight success, like you've been into punk for like over 10 years by the time your band kind of breaks. How do you feel about some of the backlash from like the purist punkers against like the Fat Record sound and so forth, especially since you kind of came from that lane?
I don't recall very much backlash. I know what you're talking about, but I don't know that a lot of it came our way, or if it did, I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah, that's rad.
I mean, I know that for sure, like in '95 in the fall, we went to Europe with Tilt for 7 weeks and playing like squats and youth centers, like legit, like punk spots, not clubs, squats and youth centers. And we were on a bus, sharing a bus with them. And that was rough in a lot of places. Because you'd roll up to this like German squat, where punkers have been since like the early 80s. And they just look at these, these American bands rolling up in their bus, and they would just be like, the fuck is this? Now, a lot of those nights ended up better by the end, but that was still sort of a weird thing. But overall, I don't think we got a lot of backlash, because at that time, concurrently with all this, because of the Offspring and to a lesser extent Green Day, major label A&R people were trying to sign every single band that looked or sounded anything like it. And so bands were getting picked off left and right and being promised like superstardom and fame and fortune, and we weren't. And so we were, like, what could anybody really say? We're on an independent label. We're doing what we want with our label telling us, because Fat's always been like, hey, whatever you guys want, we'll back you. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. Do whatever you want. So really, what can anybody say?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Before we move on for this record, I just want to say the song Wrong Again is like one of the greatest songs ever. And you got to toss it back in the playlist. I know it's a late burner on that record, but you should listen to it again and learn to re-love it, because it's perfect.
I like it. It seems petty now because it's written about a specific person, and that's water under the bridge nowadays. But it's, yeah, I'm glad you like it. Thank you.
Going into the second LP, especially with you talking about not liking the sonic qualities of the first one, it's pretty wild because you go with Ryan Green again, but the sound is like completely different. Like this is the Ryan Green sound for the second record, like the big production, the do da da da, like triggered kick drum, it's all there. What creates this giant difference, considering it's like the same band, it's a year later, it's the same engineer? How does the sonic quality change so much?
Well, it's a different drummer, but I know what you mean. I think that it's like when we went in to record the first album, we didn't know what we didn't know. We were completely blind and like unprepared, as prepared as we could be. We were still like, I'll speak for myself. I was drastically unprepared. So now I know what it's like in the studio. Now we've been on the road. We're tighter. I think that I thought I knew more than I did the second album. Like I have a hard time listening to that too. I want to remaster it or remix it or something. But one thing that's different about like sonically, Ryan was very insistent about us using this specific guitar that he had that he loved. And I wasn't really happy with it, but I didn't say anything. We kept making Sean's kick drum sound louder and louder and louder. And now it's like, it's embarrassing to listen to for me. Like I just think it's too loud, Sean's kick drum. So there's a lot of stuff we did that like, we did it because we're like, okay, we're a real band now. Like we know what we want. But I think we like overshot it maybe, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think that the big difference for me, like on a positive for that album, is instead of this disparate group of songs that had been kind of like hanging around for years, like that album was written within the year. Like we went through rehearsal space and we approached it like a job. So 5 days a week for 6-7 hours, we went to the rehearsal place and we wrote. And I had a half stack in my guitar. And I wrote a ton of stuff for that album for the first time. Like I think I'd written parts of some of the songs on Forgotten Country, but most of those were songs that Luke had. And so with the second album, I was way more involved in the songwriting. And we as a band collectively, we arrived at, hashed out, practiced, and wrote that material in a group, in a small chunk of time for that album. So to me, it sounds more together, I guess.
Yeah, it's more cohesive.
Yeah, like it's more like a single thought rather than like all these things you've been dragging behind you for 6 or 7 years.
Sure. How does it feel to like rescue a song like Last Believer, where it was demo and it was on a 7-inch, but that song was good in its original incarnation, but you turn it into like a great classic song. How do you attack like retooling a song like that? And then how does it feel when you're done with like the final creation and know you made it into something special?
I don't think I knew any of those things. I just think that of all the songs that we'd had that we hadn't recorded yet, we felt strongly about the content, like the lyrical content and the kind of anthemic qualities of it. And we wanted to by that time it was in our set. And by that time we were playing it quite a bit faster because Sean played it differently than Rich did. And just our as a band, we were playing everything a little bit faster. And so that's how that came about. I think that of all the material that had been, with us for a while, we felt like that song, and I think that Mike and Ryan agreed with us that song was strong enough to join this batch of new stuff.
So after the second LP, things just continue going strong, right? You can put out a record, go tour, everything's relatively successful. Or do you feel like you're reaching like a more comfortable plateau? Or do you feel like it's taken off even more?
I mean, that album is still our best-selling album, the second one. Mm. And I think that maybe it has to do with the material. Maybe it has to do with just that was the apex of the Fat Record phenomenon. That 96, 97.
Right.
Yeah, we toured a lot and yeah.
It's interesting though, coming off like what you said is your most successful record, because you do a lot of split 7 inches right after with hardcore bands, which is really cool. Like Split with Ignite, Split with Reliance, Split with Ensign, and most importantly, the split with Ill Repute on It's Alive. But this is a cool idea. It's like it's another thing that kind of to the observer, it keeps you guys rooted in like keeping it real. Like Good Riddance is a hardcore punk band, you know?
I think so. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like that was so like if you look at the comprehensive guide, it has way too many songs on it by today's standards. Like it's too much. And the funny thing is that those 7-inch songs, those are all the same batch of songwriting and the same recordings. I mean, recorded them somewhere different, but that was all stuff that was written at the same time. Like I was just coming in every day with like songs, and we had too many. And so we as a band sort of like pared it down, like the songs that we felt were the strongest for an album for Fat, but that left all these other songs. And so I think it was Chuck that had the idea to do 7 inches with them. So all those songs were written at the same time. And then we went to a studio we'd been to before up in Hayward and recorded all those songs for the 7 inches. But they were all part of this. They were all rehearsed and written within that same period of the comprehensive stuff.
Yeah, just another thing you do, I believe on comprehensive on a couple songs and maybe on the Ignite split, you do distortion on your vocals. What's the reasoning behind that?
Hubris. I don't know. I wouldn't have done it. If I had to do it over again, I would not do it.
Yeah, I've been curious about that because the songs are good and that almost like distracts from it.
Yep. I totally agree. I thought I knew more than I knew.
Well, I mean, it might make sense, right? Because with so many songs, you're trying to diversify even a little more. I don't know.
I mean, I appreciate you trying to bail me out there, but I just think I was. I can't even really know. I can't even really recall the logic that went into it, other than I thought maybe it would sound heavy. Like I'm trying to remember what. But like even the stuff I was listening to a lot that was influencing me then didn't have vocals like that. So I really don't know what I was thinking, and I don't know why. If anybody tried to stop me, I don't know why I didn't listen to them.
The third album sounds pretty similar to the second one. Do you feel that way as well?
I think we backed off the kick drum and made it sound like Sean's a real human being playing drums. And I think, but other than that, yeah, I mean, Ryan has, I've always thought Ryan was an incredible engineer, and he cut his teeth on different music than we did, but his knowledge of sounds and how to use the gear in the studio to get the results he wanted. And just an awesome guy to spend all day in the studio with. So I thought the sound on that record was the best we'd had yet.
Yeah, that's great. I believe it's on a tour on this record that Joe Rivas flips your van. Is that correct?
Wow, you really know a lot. Well, I mean, everybody down there knows Joe Rivas. So
that's right. He's the legend. He's episode 1.
He's a legend. And that would have been 97. We were supposed to start a tour with Sick of It All in Washington, D.C. And yet we had a show with Bl'ast. Or no, we had a show with NoFX at the Civic Auditorium here in Santa Cruz, like 2 days before that. And there's no way we can drive to D.C. in 2 days. I don't think. So we play on NoFX's gear. Our roadies leave with the van a couple days before that, and we're gonna fly to DC and meet them to start the Sick of It All run. And so Joe and our sound guy Steve were driving through Albuquerque or somewhere in New Mexico, and that's where they flipped the van.
How does the news make it to you, and what is the reaction of everyone?
I don't remember.
You don't remember the rage?
No, because we weren't mad. We were worried that they were okay.
Okay.
And then when we found out the van was drivable, because we were like, fuck, like when you first hear that, you're like, oh, hot, like we have a tour in 3 days. What are we going to do? Because back then, like that was our van. Like bands like us back then, like you owned your van. Like that was your van. That was how you got around. Like nowadays, we don't tour that much. So like we'll fly to a place to do like a weekend and rent a vehicle. But back then, like that was your van. Like that was our baby. And but mostly like we were just happy that nobody got hurt. And so I believe Chuck is the one that got the call. Yeah, I really don't remember much about it. We flew to DC. Those guys arrived. It's March, because I think we're doing like a bunch of Sick of It All shows right into like this Canadian thing called Snow Jam, where you tour across Canada in late February, early March, which is a horrible idea, but it turns out the van is drivable, but it's got these big gaps in the body of it now. So we bought some of this like spray putty to fill in the gaps because it was so cold. So we had all this spray putty all over the van to like make it airtight. But the guys showed up and they were, none the worse for wear, and they had all our gear. So the show went on.
You guys consistently just put out records and tour and put out records and tour. Like these are kind of like the glory years. Like I always think, I'm a big Iron Maiden fan, and reading their book, there's so much dedicated to them getting the band together. And then when they put out like all their classic albums, once Bruce joins the band, it all just kind of flies by, like those chapters are short just because you're rolling, and then you get to like the breakups or people leaving and so forth. And that's when like there's more drama, but there's not, like, just looking at all these albums you do, like there's nothing too much to dig into because somehow you're just like a consistently good band, right? Like every album you put out is good. Every time I see you play, you're good. Like, how do you feel about this run and like how consistent your band seems to be?
I think that if from the outside looking in, I think it probably looks the way that you have just described. We were in a position to be able to work as hard as we wanted to. And we were still in a position where we felt like we couldn't say no to anything. So like, hey, this band offered you a support slot. And it's like, fuck, we just got home from this, it's like we were still, it's hard to explain. Like we weren't willing to say no to anything because we didn't want to miss out and we didn't want to lose an opportunity. And we were just kind of on that hamster wheel. You write an album, record it, tour it all year, and then start over. There was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes and like a lot of stuff going on for me personally that I don't really have very many fond recollections of. But like as a band that all we ever wanted to do was be in a position where we could release music and tour, like we got everything that we wanted and more. And that's a huge credit to Fat for giving us that opportunity to work as hard as we were willing to work.
What brings about the breakup and how the 2007 breakup, and how soon before it happened did you know that you were going to wind the band down?
I think that we recorded My Republic, might have been 2005 maybe. And like looking back now, I think there's some really good songs on it. I think there's some average songs, but at the time we thought, because we hadn't released an album in like 2 or 3 years, which like 2001 was the biggest we ever got. Like 2001 was the top of the mountain for us. I vividly remember it. And then,
Russ, before we move on, can you dig into that? Like, in what aspect, and why do you feel that way?
well, we had just written Symptoms. So we recorded the EP, the Phenomenon of Craving, and we did a ton of touring on that. Like during that time, we did a deconstruction tour in Europe, playing big venues. We did the Warped Tour, main stage, all summer in 2000, which was huge for us. So it wasn't just like a part of the tour or the Ernie Ball stage or whatever. It was like we were on the main stage every day. And so tons of people were seeing us play who otherwise wouldn't. And we were between drummers, but that, like, luckily for us that year, Lagwagon decided to take a year off. And so Dave was able to play drums for us. So he recorded that EP with us and then did a fuckload of touring with us that year. And then in 2001, we recorded Symptoms of a Leveling Spirit, which is still my favorite. And that's the first time I ever felt like I really had a handle on being a singer and a songwriter. Like, I remember going to the studio and not dreading it. I remember doing vocals and not dreading it, and like having fun and like telling Stefan, hey, like, can I try this? Can we do this? Can I try this harmony here? Like, totally different from like how I'd been before. Just pretty confident about the songs I'd written, pretty confident about my ability to sing them and to get the most out of it. And so like that experience was really good for me. And then we toured, and whether it was just the timing or whatever, things were different. Oh, also, like we did Symptoms, and for the first time ever, Fat had us up to the office to do a marketing meeting. First time and only time ever. Like everyone at Fat brainstorming on how to push this album. From like, how are we going to approach press? Like, it was just a whole big deal. Like, so we got the sense that the label Fat has always been behind us, but that they were really behind that album and trying to like really push it. And so that's one thing. And then Vanessa, who does press there, like she's got me on this like interview schedule that's like insane. Like, she's always been super on the ball. She's always been really good about like making sure there's lots of press, but this was like a whole other level. And then we go to start our US tour with Death by Stereo and Kill Your Idols. And as the tour is like starting to go and happening, like the venues are being moved mid-tour to bigger rooms, which had never happened to us. So like now we're playing at like a new club in every town that we never played before, a bigger place, and we're selling a lot of them out. And every town we get to, there's something in the weekly about us. There's some interview I did or some feature. Almost every place we played, there was something in the weekly. So that was all new. And then we go to Europe right after that. 9/11 happened, and then we went to Europe with Death by Stereo. Same thing. Tons of press. Tons of stuff in the magazines at the clubs, and again, tons of the shows, if not all of them, are being moved to bigger rooms on that tour. So that's when like we knew kind of like this is like all of the work, all of the touring, all of the sort of refinement of our craft of playing and writing music has led to this. And so it was clearly like we'd kind of like burst through a new level in the ceiling, you know, into another space. But it was very, very short-lived.
Can you elaborate on the short-lived? Like, you don't.
Well, we got back from Europe,
mm-hmm.
and Luke told us that he decided to go back to school.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, you know, it's whatever, but like that, everything completely comes to a halt. And I was bummed because like we had this massive year and all this momentum, and now we could only tour in the summer, and even then just a little bit. But at the same time, it's like Luke's my friend and this is important to him. And so it was kind of bittersweet.
Right. So the band has to take a step back.
I always wonder like what would have happened if we'd kept that momentum.
Right. If you kept the relentless schedule.
And the new, the broader audience, the bigger rooms, the presence.
Did you have conversations about possibly just getting another guitarist? You obviously didn't decide to.
We did one tour with another guitar player during that in 2002. We got offered to do this tour with Anti-Flag and Strike Anywhere. And we really didn't want to turn it down. Luke couldn't do it. And so we asked our friend Duncan, who was in Endpoint and By the Grace of God, to play. And we did the tour, but I think all of us felt a little bit strange about it. Like Chuck, Sean and me.
Yeah,
but, that wouldn't have been Sean. That wasn't Sean. That was Dave Wagon Shoots. But yeah, so we decided not to do that after that anymore.
Okay, so circling back to the breakup, what brings it about, and what are the conversations here?
Well, so we recorded My Republic. We thought it was a pretty strong album, and we released it. And it's a lot of this has nothing to do with us. It's just the ebbs and flows of the industry and technology and the way people consume music. So we released this album, and like nobody bought it. And we're like, well, that sucks. And then we toured and nobody was coming to the shows. And so we're like, well, this really sucks. And all of us had, at one time or another, we've played shows with bands that we looked up to, who were older than us, who were kind of on the downslope. And I think there's a way to do that gracefully, and most bands that we knew did. But at the same time, it was always sort of something that I took note of. We played these shows with some bands, and people would, like, we were the main support, and people would leave after we played. I'd go to see a band play that I really liked, and there was nobody at the show really. And I remember taking it. There's that thing in Spinal Tap where it says, Puppet Show and Spinal Tap. And like, I never wanted to be that band. I was like, man, I hope that when our band reaches that point, that we have the good sense to recognize it and to bow out with some degree of grace and dignity. That was a thing that was really big in my mind. And then with the My Republic situation, it was like, whoa, like, what the fuck? And, by then the emo band things were getting really big, a lot more metal, just, music was changing as it always does. And so there's that. And then our fans are like in their 30s now. Like, some of them are married, they got kids, they got day jobs. Like, they're not going to go out to a show on a Tuesday night. And so I think the confluence of those two things are what brought it about. Because, like, it wasn't like I hate a word in my band, I want to break up. It wasn't that at all. I basically got Chuck and Luke together, and I was like, hey, I don't know if you guys noticed, but like, this isn't going the way that it used to go. And I don't want to be that band. Like, I don't want to be, Puppet Show and Spinal Tap. That's kind of how it started.
Were they on the same page, or was there pushback?
I think there was pushback, and I think they were on the same page. I think a little of both. It's not a fun thing to talk about, right? It's not like,
no, it's terrible.
I was doing another band by that point. Luke and Chuck both had families, children. Because when Luke went back to school, it started this ripple effect of like, now we all got to get day jobs again. And so we all got day jobs. And like, for example, Chuck's day job took off. Like, Chuck's a baller now. He's salaried. Like, he's he's in a good spot, aside from being in a band, And so we've got these different lives now. And Chuck and Luke both at that time had really, really young children as well. So that's kind of how that went. I was like, hey, like and then like we talked about, well, let's play some last shows. Like let's at least give people an opportunity to come one last time and hang out. And so we decided to do that. And then I decided to write something about it for our local weekly here.
What were like the emotions of doing that show and then the night of the show?
So we played 3 shows. We played Hollywood, San Diego, and then the last one was here in Santa Cruz. I think that it really didn't hit me until the last show. We played Hollywood, and because of the way the PA was or whatever, I would always go back and forth with problems with my voice on tour, and we were playing so many songs at these shows because they were like, it's like, hey, it's a career spanning set, so it's not going to be 30 minutes. So we were playing these shows, and there was a lot of songs, and I didn't properly warm up. So Hollywood was okay, but then in San Diego, I was fucked, and I could barely sing, and I was like, oh, cool, the last show we're ever going to play in our hometown, and I can't even talk. So the whole way driving home from San Diego, I was just, all I could think about was my voice. All I could think about. And I was calling every singer I knew, and I was trying everybody's bag of tricks. Like nothing was too crazy for me to try that day. But luckily by the show, I was able to pull it off. There was people that flew from Europe for that show. I mean, it was nuts. It was really kind of cool. But at the same time, I remember being so ready to be done with Good Riddance. I was so ready. So it was almost like, I remember this as the last note of the last song was like ringing out into the crowd. I just kind of was like standing there thinking like this huge weight was lifted, because I had just defined myself so much by being the singer of that band. And I think to marry myself and my sense of my self-worth to something that's so out of my control was not a really intelligent thing to do. And I had been long since suffering the consequences of it. And so to be able to sort of like let that go was really attractive to me.
How many years after the breakup do you start to get that itch that like you're going to have to do this again?
I don't like the term breakup, but I guess we decided to stop. I guess it's the same thing, but to me, there's a semantic difference.
Okay.
You know what I mean, though? Like, it wasn't like...
Yeah, breakup.
We've toured with bands that broke up on tour. Like, hey, why are those guys pulling over? Like, why are they fighting? Like,
right. A breakup is like a negative...
Yeah, I've seen that happen. And that wasn't the case with us. It was kind of like, hey, these guys in my band we've got careers starting. We've got small children at home. We've got the music industry and the music buying public have clearly indicated that they're onto something different now. And rather than go out there and just keep banging away at it and like trying to force it down their throats, like, why don't we just step away? We got everything we could have ever wanted and more. We had a tremendous opportunity to travel and to meet people and to impact people's lives in what we hope is a positive way. Like we've been overpaid in this band. Like, let's just step away. That's kind of more what it was like. So, I mean,
we can say not break up, but we decided the curtain on the first chapter.
And then, so obviously, well, or not, but like, so in the intervening years, we continually got offers, mostly from our European booking agent. Like, hey, here's a stupid amount of money to go play Gross Rock, or here's a stupid amount of money to go play the Reading Festival. And, he would email me and he'd be like, I know what you're going to say, but I feel like I just have to tell you, like, they're going to offer you blah, blah, blah to go do this. And I wasn't into it. I didn't want anything to do with it. I didn't want to be one of those bands that kept reforming and breaking up and reforming or stopping and going away. Since we had made this big deal about our final shows, I thought it would be disingenuous to just do a cash grab and go play a festival. Had we been one of those bands that said like, hey, we're going to go on hiatus, maybe in hindsight, that would have been a more prudent thing to say. But we made a big deal. We like, you can't unring that bell. Like, final show, last show, we're stopping, like all this.
Well, yeah. Plus a record. You put out a record of the.
Yeah, the last show. And so I was doing another band and I was fine with that. The other guys were raising children and had careers going. And so I wasn't interested. Year after year after year, I wasn't interested. I had a couple conversations with Chuck during that time where he was like, would really like try to bring it up. And I still wasn't interested in it. In 2012, I finally agreed to go have coffee with him and Luke. And we had a long talk, mostly about how we missed playing the songs. And by this time, those guys' children are older. By this time, everybody's kind of settled in their career or what have you. And I agreed to rehearse to see what it would feel like. And so that's how that started.
Right, because in 2012, you do a website post, so you're getting back together.
Yeah.
And then
we rehearsed. It was fun. And then we agreed to play Gros Rock in Belgium. And before that, we played a show here in town at a small club under a different name. Like, we played on a third on a bill under a different name, just as kind of a warm-up show.
What name did you use?
Dire Warning.
What's the story behind that?
I just thought it sounded cool.
This is a cool punk name.
I have a million of those.
Yeah.
And so but somehow the whole town found out about it. And I have photos from that show. It was like complete bedlam, like in the best way. Like, it was just insanity. And getting that kind of response after that much time away was great. And also, I think that I'll wait to see what you're going to ask before I go on. What's your next question?
My next question is this: what it felt like to write songs together. Like, how natural was it after that much time?
It was fine. It was like a lot of things, like what I was going to say just a second ago, like having that 5 years away really helped me put my band into it made it right sized, because it wasn't right sized for me before. I was so concerned with numbers and show attendance and record sales and how many people did this band get here at this last week, or you know what I mean? Like, just this, I was in competition secretly with all of my friends' bands, and I was consumed with things that I couldn't control, and it took a toll on me emotionally. It wasn't really healthy, but it's because it was how I defined myself and my self-worth. And then when I didn't have that band anymore, it was almost like, okay, like my band's place, such as it is in musical history, is defined, and nothing we do now will change that. And we you know what, at the end of the day, we weren't the biggest band in the world. We weren't the smallest band in the world. We just were. And it's cool. And I'm at peace with it. And that was really healthy for me. And then also, like, I had a ton of resentment against my bandmates for like imagined slights and all sorts of things I dreamed of in my head or whatever. Like, and I made peace with all of them. And then, but then also, I wasn't during the time we were touring. I was often not able to enjoy the fact that we were touring. I was often so consumed with this imagined competition I was in with all my friends' bands, and or believing that my bandmates were out to get me or undermine me, that I wasn't able to enjoy the fact that I was getting to do all these things. And it's really tragic. And so what was cool about getting together to write songs again or going to play shows again was like, there was none of that for me. I was like, man, these are three people that I have a lot of miles with, that I have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for. And look what we get to do. Isn't this fucking cool? That's kind of how it was after 2012, which was amazing. And then writing. So in the intervening years, I had, written and released a solo album, but I kept picking up the guitar and writing like punk songs, but I had no band. Like, I can't write stuff for Only Crime. Like, it's way over my pay grade, but I was writing these punk songs that I thought, like, man, these are pretty cool. Like, and so I got my buddy, Luke Ray, who plays in the Swingin' Utters now, to come down and we went to a studio here in town and hammered out 4 songs that I'd written. So I did guitar, bass, vocals, and then Luke did the drums. And I was just sitting on these songs. And so when we started playing together again, at first it was like we were just playing festivals and this and that, and we were just playing all of our same old songs. But I think that being in a band, a lot of times you start to feel like, well, I'm not a jukebox. Like, we're not a jukebox. Like, these songs are cool and we missed them and it's fun to play them. But like, now that we're all here and like, you got a guitar and you got a bass and you got drums, like I kind of want to write something new with you guys. Like that was like an unspoken thing that happened with us. And so I played those guys these 4 songs I had, and they thought that 2 of them sounded like they could be Good Riddance songs. And then Luke had been doing the same stuff. Luke had been piling away riffs and song ideas. And so Luke's like, hey, check it out. I got this, and this, and these all sound cool. So like, once we decided that we wanted to explore new music again, we had a really good base of material for the Peace in Our Time thing.
Yeah. How do you feel about the last 2 records? Because personally, I think Thoughts and Prayers is one of your best records. And I've told that to a bunch of people, and I've had a bunch of people tell me, yeah, it's really good, but Peace in Our Time is like, I think, one of their best records. It's like even better than Thoughts and Prayers. So like, you come back, you do 2 records that seem like everyone loves them. How do you feel about the 2 of them?
I like Thoughts and Prayers better, but I like both of them. But again, like, Peace in Our Time is kind of like the forgotten country of like Good Riddance 2.0. Like, it's some songs that I wrote with no intention of ever playing them with Good Riddance. And it's a bunch of stuff that Luke had written just because he's Luke and he's got a guitar and he's going to write stuff, like, we all kind of know what Good Riddance music is or should sound like, but it wasn't like we got together to write an album. We had probably half the album done laying around when we got back together. We just didn't know it at the time. You know what I mean? And then Thoughts and Prayers was like, let's write a new album from the ground up.
Was there any consideration of ending up anywhere but Fat?
No, not that I could think of. We've never been. Yeah, we've always been a band that we're pretty blue collar. Like, Fat gave us everything we needed, and there was never any reason to go anywhere else.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that's kind of special about your band. You know, it's kind of like Kobe was like one of the last basketball players to like be on a team and stick with it. You know, it's like a lot of people jump around a lot, and there's something to that loyalty that goes to like the character of the people that just ride something out that seems fair.
Well, I think that there was probably 29 other teams that would have loved to have Kobe. There were no other labels that ever offered us anything. So it wasn't like, yeah, you know, Universal just offered us $1 million, but like, we love Fat. It was like, we love Fat. And even if another label did offer us something, we would likely turn it down anyway.
Right.
Because by then I had known people who had signed to majors, and I knew the fallout, and I knew how that story ends for about 99.9% of the bands that sign. And so why would we leave a strong independent label that will give us everything we need or want and give us no restrictions on what we do? So it's perfect.
Right. You say that you've come to peace with like Good Riddance's place in history. Can you kind of describe that in your own words to wrap it up?
I think that we accomplished more than we had any right to, being from a small beach town. And I think that I know just from the amount of mail and personal interaction I get and have gotten, that as much as I may have spent a lot of the time focused inward on trivialities, that in the bigger picture, there are a lot of people who gleaned something positive from our music that made a big difference in their lives. And then as a person who has taken positive things from other bands and have made a huge difference in my life, I know exactly what that feels like. And it's tremendously humbling. And it's really cool. Like the people that liked our band enough to like pull us aside and say, hey, like your band meant a lot to me, or means a lot to me, or like, because of your band, this change has happened in my life. Like, that's really powerful. And again, it's really humbling. It's not anything that we would have foreseen. And so that part of it is the best part of the deal for me. Like, all we were trying to do was to like make a dent in the world, and to get people to think about things, and to try to make the world a better place. And it seems insignificant because our band was never really big. We weren't ever huge or popular or whatever, but enough people have shared with me the ways that our music affected them. And they are almost all positive. And so what a great thing to be able to do.
That rules. Yeah. So I know I skipped Creep Division. I skipped Only Crime because your discography is daunting, Russ. You've put out a lot of stuff, and no one wants to listen to a 3-hour interview. No. But other than that, do you feel like you've been well represented here?
I do.
Good. That's awesome. I appreciate your time so much. I hope that I hope it wasn't too miserable for you.
No, it was a nice trip down memory lane. I really impressed that you knew about State of Grace.
Yeah, well, we got to do our homework.
I posted that demo tape on my Facebook page, I think a year or so ago.
Oh,
like I finally got the tape, the 1/2-inch tape, and I was able to digitize it. And yeah, it was pretty cool. Like, because I hadn't heard it in so long. So,
how did it sound to like your ears hearing it that much later?
To me, it still sounds like really like advanced rock and roll for like where we were at with our age and our musical maturation. To me, it still holds up really well. And I really wish we could have recorded the new stuff we had right before we stopped playing. But it's kind of cool that I was able to get the tape and find it and get it digitized and all that and have it for posterity.
Did you stay in touch with like the rocker dude that got into RKL, that you were ever able to tell him that
Yeah,
late RKL.
that's Luke. That's Luke. Like he's
Jesus.
Yeah.
So that's how I should have. Fuck, I should have paid. That was terrible on my part. But yeah. So what was that like for Luke to get to tour with a dude from RKL? Like it wasn't Bomber, but it was like the guy that played on the last RKL record.
He's
kind of full circle.
He loved it. I mean, we all love Dave, but Luke loves Barry and Chris.
Yeah,
did the most.
Yeah.
So we get to tour with Chris a lot with Lagwagon, but then we this past year we did some shows with MDC, and of all people, Barry was playing guitar for MDC.
That's so rad.
And so suddenly we're at a club and there's Barry. So it was really funny having this, because we played in '93. We played some shows with RKL, and but I hadn't seen Barry since then. I see Chris all the time, but I hadn't seen Barry since then.
I'll get Chris soon. We've been playing phone tag for a year.
Yeah,
or so.
He's awesome. Chris is great.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time, Russ. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.